So you hear the name Elon Musk, and what comes to mind? Right, rockets, Teslas, maybe even X. But I bet you don't think of a government initiative called DOGE. Yep, DOGE. We're not totally sure if it's an acronym or just a name designed to make you look twice, but its whole purpose? To go after government spending in Washington.
So check this out. When someone asked Musk how this whole Doge thing went, his answer was, well, pretty muted. He said it was a little bit successful, somewhat successful. Kind of makes you wonder, right? What was this project that even he seemed to think was just okay? And more importantly, did it actually change anything?
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a handle on what this initiative even was. Then we'll dig into the kind of wasteful spending they were targeting. After that, we'll talk about their Sledgehammer Approach and ask if that mindset is still kicking around DC today. And finally, we'll look at the big ongoing fight over spending that's still happening right now. So, what was the big idea? Well, according to Musk himself, the mission was actually pretty simple. It was all about stopping the government from funding things that, in his words, made no sense and were entirely wasteful. And that really gets to the heart of the problem they were trying to solve, right? This idea of huge, out-of-control government waste. But think about it. How do you get the average person to actually care about something that feels so big and abstract?
Well, their strategy was to make it real. To take it from being just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet and turn it into something concrete. The goal was to show people the actual dollars and cents going to specific projects that, they argued, did absolutely nothing for the public. The hope? To get people, as one person put it, enraged.
And to do that, they pointed to some, let's just say, very specific and memorable examples. You ready for this? Stuff like $20 million for a Sesame Street program in Iraq, or funding for dance classes in Wuhan, China, and even money for DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs in other countries. I mean, these are the exact kinds of things they were pointing to as classic examples of government waste. Okay, so they had their list of targets. The big question is, what did they do about it? How did they actually try to cut this spending? Well, let's just say their approach wasn't exactly delicate. It was described less like a surgeon's scalpel and more like a sledgehammer. So a sledgehammer approach, what does that actually mean? Basically, it was all about brute force, being super aggressive and direct. The whole idea was to just blow past all the usual red tape and bureaucracy and go straight after the spending they thought was a waste. No messing around. And believe it or not, this actually had a huge ripple effect. The sources we're looking at call it so transformative that it literally changed the way entire government agencies, like the State Department, looked at their foreign spending. And that's the key thing to get here. The goal wasn't just to cross a few things off a list. No. The real win was to change how people thought about spending altogether. Okay, but here's the million-dollar question. Did that new mindset actually stick? Or did everything just go back to the way it was before as soon as everyone stopped paying attention? It turns out the answer really comes down to the people who were part of this whole thing. So a huge part of this story is about who they got on board. Apparently, this project pulled in, and I'm quoting here, the smartest people. These were folks who left behind massive paychecks in the private sector to come and donate their time to try and fix things in government. And what's really interesting is that a lot of them, well, they stayed. They didn't just pack up and go home when the main project was over. The sources say many of the original DOGE team members are still there inside the government. They just moved into new jobs, but they took that cut-the-fat attitude with them. And you can apparently still see their fingerprints on stuff happening today. The source we're looking at points to things like the National Design Studio and even how the Department of Energy is rolling out AI. These are supposedly places where you can still feel the impact of that efficiency-first, cost-cutting mindset. But look, even with those wins and that lasting influence, let's be real, the battle over government spending is nowhere near over. And this gets us right to the heart of the constant tug-of-war that's always going on in Washington. This next part really says it all. There's this story about Musk meeting with members of Congress, right? And they'd apparently tell him, Elon, we love what you are doing, but some things in my district you shouldn't touch. It perfectly sums up the problem, doesn't it? Everybody wants to cut wasteful spending, as long as it's not their wasteful spending. And I mean, that's a world away from the whole point of the DOGE initiative. Its stated goal was to expose and stop
all the fraudulent spending that goes nowhere, the kind of spending that doesn't improve the lives of the American people. The ideal was an all-out war on waste, no matter whose backyard it was in. And if you look at what's happening now, you can see that tension playing out. The source points to recent spending bills that are still chock full of earmarks. You know, those special funds for very specific local projects. They call them pet projects for a reason. We're talking about things like $1 million for elevators at the Met Opera in New York, or another $1 million for the AFL-CIO of Michigan. This is literally the exact kind of stuff the DOGE initiative was created to stop. So what you end up with is this constant clash. On one side, you've got this push for big, sweeping cuts across the board. But on the other side, you have politicians fighting tooth and nail to bring money home for their own districts. It's this fundamental conflict that just seems to be built into the very DNA of Washington. Which really brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? Is waste just in the eye of the beholder? I mean, one person's ridiculous pet project could be another person's absolutely vital community investment. So that $1 million for elevators at the opera, is that a critical grant for the arts or just wasteful government spending? The answer, it seems, really just depends on who you're asking, and maybe more importantly, whose district it's in.